Former Catholic priest James Rapp was sentenced to up to 40 years in prison Friday. The 75-year-old ex-priest who taught at Jackson Lumen Christi High School in South Central Michigan in the 1980s pleaded no contest to criminal sexual conduct for raping and molesting his students. His crime imposition was a murder on my soul, victim Andy Russell said in court Friday. John C. Wood, another victim who was on the school's wrestling team, said the priest abused him when they had to share a room during a competition trip to Detroit. Wood said Rapp would say the Lord's Prayer before he would get into his bed and have his way. The investigation into Rapp, Michigan began in 2013 when victims approached the sheriff's department.
In the past 4 years, more than 180 people have come forward claiming they were sexually abused by priests in this area over the past 60 years. 66, more than one-third, reported they were molested by former priest Patrick O'Donnell. Tonight, for the first time, he confesses to his sins and offers an apology to everyone.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
In a series of videotaped depositions, Patrick O'Donnell admits he preyed on young boys while serving as a priest in the Spokane Catholic Diocese.
Did you molest the two brothers on the same outing? Yes. When did you molest the other boy?
I believe it was in the summer of 1974.
O'Donnell confesses there were so many boys, he has trouble remembering them all.
During the period 1972 until you left in 1976, approximately how many teenage boys did you have sexual contact with?
I don't know.
Can you give us an order of magnitude, like more than 10?
Yes.
More than 20?
I went through all of this in previous testimony, and I think that I said everybody, but I don't remember ever doing a count. But I'm sure it was more than 20 over all the years.
O'Donnell testified his first sexual experience came as a teenager when he was a freshman in high school at Gonzaga Prep.
I wasn't attracted to sexual relationships with women.
In the following years at Gonzaga University, the seminary, and then as a priest, O'Donnell says he fought his desire to molest boys, but he couldn't stop.
I was not interacting with most of these teenagers so that I could have sex with them at some point in the future.
What were you doing?
Trying to be a good leader and a good person most of the time, and then I would kind of fall.
Okay. Certainly touching 12, 13, 14-year-old boys on the penis or genitals wasn't being a good leader, was it?
No.
O'Donnell used his position as a priest to surround himself with teenage boys. He admits molesting boys on camping and boating trips, and he would even bring boys into his bedroom at the church rectory.
Why were you giving a back rub to a boy with his underwear on?
We were sleeping, or in bed together. We were going to sleep that night.
How old was that kid at the time?
He was only about 12.
Okay, why were you sleeping in bed with a 12-year-old?
In those days, I didn't see that that was wrong.
O'Donnell says he would get dozens of boys naked at local lakes and a church swimming pool.
I know I took a lot of boys up to Mount St. Michael's where there was skinny dipping, and I didn't consider that sexual abuse, but I know that I did get involved in abusing some. One of them is Mr. Barber, who's here, and I'm very sorry that I ever hurt him.
Mr. Barber is Steve Barber. He was abused by O'Donnell for 14 months as a teenager.
I wanted to see him face to face.
Barber attended a November 14, 2007 deposition, and he says he doesn't believe O'Donnell's apology is sincere. O'Donnell abused more boys after Steve Barber. When there were complaints, the diocese moved O'Donnell to a new parish. No one ever called police, and O'Donnell was free to molest again.
You always knew it was wrong to sexually contact teenage boys, did you not?
Yes. In some level, I think I always knew that it was wrong.
Well, that wasn't even a close question in your mind, was it? You knew it was wrong, for example, to touch a teenage boy's genitals when You were a seminarian or a priest, correct?
Yes.
In 1986, the diocese sent O'Donnell over to Seattle for treatment, but he admits he never stopped preying on teenage boys and even continued when he returned to Spokane.
Well, Darren and people were shocked by the initial report, and now an official close to the investigation tells News 8 that that priest also owned a sex shop, and he used that shop to launder money that he made in his drug dealings. Monsignor Kevin Wallen of St. Augustine's Cathedral Parish in Bridgeport arrested for his part in a meth drug ring. Federal authorities charged Wallen with distributing methamphetamine, and they say some of those drug sales happened here at Wallen's apartment in Waterbury. Authorities say Wallen would then launder the money through this adult sex shop that he bought in North Haven. The diocese says parishioners expressed concern about Monsignor Wallen's strange behavior. Sources tell the Connecticut Post, while still a pastor, Wallen was seen dressed as a woman and was visited by other men dressed as women. They allegedly engaged in sexual acts with the Monsignor in the cathedral's rectory.
A former Roman Catholic priest was ultimately convicted and sent to prison for molesting children over a period lasting many years.
In tonight's Fox 11 Investigates, Gina Silva reports the priest is not only out of prison now, but back in church, pretending to still be a man of the cloth.
In this small church in South LA, he's known as Father Carlos Ramirez, a priest who prays over his parishioners, offers the Eucharist to the faithful, and is friendly with the children. Parishioners have no idea this man is a convicted sex offender using an alias, a former Roman Catholic priest who was sentenced to 8 years in prison for sexually molesting boys in Santa Paula.
Gina Silva with Fox 11 News. Why are you using a different name?
I don't know what this is.
He was shocked to find himself the subject of our Fox 11 investigation.
Your name isn't Carlos Ramirez. Your name is Carlos Rodriguez, a registered sex offender.
Rodriguez didn't want to talk to us.
You're not going to get anything. Sorry.
In 1986, Rodriguez was ordained as a priest. A year later, he was accused of sexually molesting a 7-year-old girl. The church sent him to Maryland for treatment, where it was concluded that he was not suffering from pedophilia. So he was sent back to California.
One after another, he's going around the parishes in the Ventura and Santa Barbara County areas where he meets numerous families.
By 1993, there were so many complaints. Rodriguez was relieved of his clerical duties, but he continued to work at different parishes in California. Finally, in 1998, Rodriguez was laicized and no longer allowed to have any affiliation with the Roman Catholic Church. In 2004, he was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison for the sexual molestation of Manuel and Eric Barragan. Rodriguez is back at a non-sanctioned Catholic church, passing himself off as a priest, using the alias Carlos Ramirez. Attorney DeMarco says he's not surprised.
This man is a predator with children, and he utilizes that collar, he utilizes that priestly mantle to get access to children to molest them.
You're back in a church when you know you have been defrauded. Do you have anything to say to these families? Do you realize that you have destroyed the lives of these boys?
When we spoke with parishioners about the man they know as Father Carlos, we got mixed reactions. This lady said she doesn't care, and we should leave it up to God because we're nobody to criticize. Others struggle to believe it.
I'm shocked, and I don't want to answer none of that.
And this woman from the community.
Estoy indignada.
I am indignant, and I pray to God all of this is seen and we react properly to what's being presented here.
A man who worked in a children's home in South London before becoming a Catholic priest has been jailed for 12 years after finally admitting that he sexually abused 12 children dating back to the 1970s. 67-year-old Philip Temple first went on trial in the 1990s, but he was acquitted. After avoiding justice for decades, he was arrested again last year and pleaded guilty. Our social affairs correspondent Alison Holt has more details.
The now closed Shirley Oaks Children's Homes in South London was one of the places where Philip Temple was able to sexually abuse vulnerable boys and girls entrusted to his care in the 70s. The 67-year-old, described in court as a skillful manipulator, later became a priest. That didn't stop the abuse. Today he was jailed for 12 years after admitting offences against 12 children, one believed to have been just 6. The Roman Catholic Church in England says it raised concerns about Temple, but that there was a limit to what it could do here in the Diocese of Westminster. That's because as a monk he was answerable to the head of his order in Italy.
There were, since 2004 to the end of 2013, 848 priests who were dismissed from the clerical status and reduced to the lay status. And several hundreds more had received other types of penalties. So that together they are about 3,500 priests.
Father Jeffrey Polish, a priest in the Diocese of Scranton, found himself in handcuffs overnight at the Dunmore police station. The 57-year-old was arrested and later charged with various crimes, including for having sex with a 15-year-old boy. Investigators tell us police caught Father Polish in the act with the teen around 9:30 last night. The pair was in this car, parked near the tennis courts at the Penn State Worthington Scranton campus. The school's security officers quickly called for backup. Soon after, Dunmore Police and the Lackawanna County District Attorney's Office made the bust. The DA's office added that when they questioned why Polish was on a college campus, he told them he was working on his homily when he somehow ran into the teen, who seemed emotionally distressed. Court papers state the priest eventually confessed, saying he and the boy met on the internet through an online classified ad site known as Craigslist. Authorities tell us the 15-year-old answered an ad from the priest who said he was looking for companionship. Officers also point out that the priest stressed to cops he did ask the teen 3 times if he was 18 years old. Now with Father Polish behind bars, there's a noticeable absence at the house of worship where he served as an assistant pastor, Prince of Peace Parish in Old Forge. Parishioners tell us Father Polish has only been at this church since July. Before that, he was on medical leave, but at one time was actually here many years ago. Many we talked with didn't want to go on camera, but they described the priest as, quote, a humble and quiet man, yet they're still shocked of what allegedly happened.
The Public Gallery of a Sydney court broke into applause today as a former Catholic priest was sentenced for child sex offences. John Denham will serve at least 13 years in jail for his crimes against 39 schoolboys. In sentencing, the judge described Denham's offences as sadistic and persistent.
Matthew Oakley is one of the 39 boys John Denham sexually abused between 1968 and 1986. The youngest was 5, the oldest 16. For these offences, the former Catholic priest was sentenced to a maximum of 19 years in jail. There was a degree of planning. Some of the complainants were particularly targeted as vulnerable children, either due to their family circumstances or their personal fragility. Victims sat crying as the court heard graphic details about how he abused the boys at school, on outings and in their homes.
After the complaints, the church did nothing. Denham was left at Pius X College and then moved 2 more parishes in the Maitland-Newcastle Diocese, where he continued his abusive perversion.
I think that the principal of the school might have been getting stood over to some extent by John Denham. You know, he was out of control within the school.
Father Thomas Brennan was the headmaster at St Pius High School while Denham was a teacher there. The court heard when he was told of Denham's abuse, at best he took no action, at worst he caned the boys.
I can't believe I sent my children to a school like that. The hierarchy of the Catholic Church is disgusting.
Father Benedict Groeschel said in an interview with the National Catholic Register that in, quote, a lot of cases the youngster is the seducer. To make matters worse, he said that priests involved in relationships with teens shouldn't go to jail because they didn't mean to commit a crime. Now, this coming just 10 years after shocking reports surfaced of widespread sex abuse cases within the Catholic Church.
A high-ranking priest in the Boston Archdiocese accused of an unholy act. Police say he paid a woman to have sex.
Police say this is not the first time he's gone looking for prostitutes. Monsignor Arthur Coyle of Lowell arrested for allegedly paying for sex with a prostitute. A Lowell police officer says on Sunday evening, while conducting surveillance in this neighborhood for drug and prostitution activity, he spotted the 62-year-old Monsignor in his car with a, quote, self-admitted prostitute and drug addict. The officer says he followed them to the back of the Polish cemetery in Lowell, said to be a known place where prostitutes bring their customers. The officer says he arrested Coyle after the woman he was with admitted he paid her for sex they were about to have. But in the police report, the officer says detectives have observed Arthur Coyle well over a dozen different times driving around the same areas. The officer says he's observed him stop and slow down every time he sees a single female or a known prostitute walking. Coyle, who lives at the rectory at St. Rita's Church in Lowell, is an Episcopal vicar at the Boston Archdiocese, overseeing 47 parishes in the Merrimack area.
A $10 million payout for the Roman Catholic Archdiocese in Los Angeles as the church settles 4 cases alleging sex abuse by former priest Michael Baker. Newly released files show that Baker confessed to Cardinal Roger Mahony back in 1986. He had been molesting 2 brothers for years. Mahony sent Baker for psychological treatment, but ultimately allowed him to return to his ministry where he molested again. Mahony is now at the papal conclave in Rome.